The Saturn Time Trap, the ancient entity that built our reality prison, begins with a question most people never dare whisper aloud, yet it pulses beneath every sleepless night and every déjà vu you've ever felt. What if time itself is not a natural force, but a cage? What if the seconds you feel slipping away were engineered, not born? What if the past, present, and future were stitched into a loop designed to keep you from ever seeing the edges of your own existence? And what if the architect of this loop is not the God you were taught to worship, but an ancient entity revered in silence, feared in stone, and disguised by mythology? Before we step into this labyrinth, take a moment, yes, you, listening right now. Tap the like button, support the channel, and leave a comment if you've ever felt time behaving strangely around you. Because what you're about to hear is not just mythology. It is a structure, a mechanism, a prison. Whispers. And we are the inmates. Now breathe. Slow. Let the seconds stretch. Because once you learn who really forged the chains of time, you'll never experience a sunrise, a routine day, or even your own memories the same way again. You've heard the name Saturn all your life, packaged neatly in astronomy textbooks, disguised as a harmless gas giant wrapped in pretty rings. But those rings, yes, those perfect circular bands, hold a meaning far older than science, far darker than any religious scripture dares to admit. Cultures separated by continents and millennia all feared Saturn not as a planet, but as a ruler. The devourer of ages, the warden of cycles, the keeper of time. Kronos, the reaper of minutes, Father Time himself. And here is the question that should spark a cold shiver down your spine. Why did every ancient culture describe Saturn as the entity that governed time, fate, limitation, sacrifice, and imprisonment? Why would civilizations who never met, who shared no language, no trade, no migration routes, all agree that Saturn was not a star, but a being with an agenda? Could they have all glimpsed the same truth, one that we have forgotten, or worse, one that was deliberately hidden from us? The origins of the Saturn Time Trap lie in the world before ours, in a primordial era when the sky was not arranged as it is today. Ancient cosmology, Sumerian, Gnostic, Hermetic, even early Hindu traditions speak of a time when Saturn loomed in the heavens like a second sun, static, unmoving, watching humanity like a cosmic eye. This was the era of the Golden Age, a period of alleged freedom, expanded consciousness, and unbounded lifespans. Humanity was not yet in the prison we now inhabit, but according to these forgotten texts, the Golden Age ended when Saturn changed its role from guide to jailer, from father to captor, from cosmic shepherd to the architect of time itself. And here is the part you should pay attention to, because this is where the trap begins. When Saturn fell from its heavenly position, mythologies everywhere described the same event using different names: the fall of Kronos, the binding of Shani, the rebellion of El, the black cube descending. Over and over, the story repeats like a glitch in a simulation. An ancient entity was dethroned, or pretended to be, and in its downfall, it created the structure we now call time. And we naively walk inside it like good little prisoners, celebrating our birthdays, our New Year's, our calendars, not realizing these are shackles disguised as traditions. Now think, how often have you felt that life loops, that you're living the same patterns, the same people, the same heartbreaks, the same ambitions, over and over, as if your soul is running laps around an invisible track. That's the trap. And right now, as you listen, that trap is humming around you. If you're still here, comment below. Have you ever felt time repeat itself in your life? Your answer might tell you more about your consciousness than you expect. And if you haven't tapped like yet, do it. It keeps the truth circulating, because we're only getting started. To understand the Saturn Time Trap, we must examine the architecture of the cage, because every prison has a blueprint, and this one is meticulously engineered. Ancient occult systems, from Kabbalah to the Orphic mysteries, describe Saturn as the seventh gate, the final barrier between the physical world and the realms outside creation. Meaning, you and I are not just trapped in time, we are trapped in a closed system overseen by Saturn's influence. The Gnostics went even further, claiming Saturn was one of the Archons, cosmic administrators tasked with maintaining the illusion of reality. But here's the caveat most people don't realize. Saturn was not simply an Archon. He was the ruler of the Archons, the Demiurge's left hand, the one responsible for locking souls into the cycle of birth, struggle, decay, and death. Kronos, in Greek myth, consumed his children to prevent them from escaping his rule. That story is not literal. It is metaphysical. Saturn does not eat bodies. Saturn eats time. He consumes your years, not your flesh. Every hour lost, every moment of regret, every cycle of routine, that is the feast. And humanity, unaware, keeps serving the plate. The rings of Saturn themselves have long been viewed by occult traditions as symbolic chains, reinforcing repetition. In magical lore, a ring traps energy. It forms a loop, a cycle, a binding. Saturn is the only planet known for its perfect rings. Coincidence? Of course not. Modern science discovered something even stranger. Saturn emits an eerie, droning frequency. NASA recorded it. It sounds like a mechanical hum, a modulation, almost like a machine running in the background of the solar system. Many researchers, mainstream and fringe, have speculated that Saturn broadcasts a frequency that shapes consciousness on Earth. The idea is simple, but unsettling. Consciousness aligns to frequency. If Saturn transmits a signal and Earth receives it through its magnetic field, then thought, memory, and perception themselves may fall under Saturn's influence. Now pause. Let that sink in. If time is a broadcast, then your life is not a sequence of events, but a program, one so subtle you mistake it for nature. And the worst part? The program loops. The yugas in Hindu cosmology repeat. The great year repeats. The Mayan Baktuns repeat. Fate repeats. Your personal patterns repeat. But here's where things get fascinating and horrifying. Ancient cults such as the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, and early Semitic priesthoods worshipped Saturn through the symbol of the black cube. Not a sphere, a cube. Why? Because a cube represents compression, limitation, boundaries, the geometry of imprisonment. It is the shape of restriction. It is the shape of staying inside. And in many ancient rites, the cube represented the box of time, the cage of incarnation, the final trap. Before enlightenment, Saturn wasn't just feared, he was obeyed. Because the priests knew the cost of defiance, aging, decay, misfortune, karmic debt, cycles looping endlessly, and they taught that only through special knowledge, gnosis, could one escape the cycle of Saturn. That legacy survives today, hidden in symbols across the world. The Kaaba in Mecca, the black cube sculptures in New York, Melbourne, Tokyo, corporate logos resembling cubes, judges wearing black robes, symbolic of Saturn's authority, even graduation caps, squares worn as a sign that you've completed a cycle. Once you notice the pattern, you can't unsee it. And if you're still watching, comment. Do you think symbols control us subconsciously? Let me know below. Your insights fuel this investigation. And remember, support this video with a like so we can go deeper into the heart of the trap, because what comes next reveals why Saturn built the prison to begin with. The motive behind the Saturn Time Trap is the final piece of the puzzle. And it's the part no ancient priest wanted written down explicitly, because it shatters the comforting illusions of free will, divine mercy, and destiny. According to multiple occult traditions, humanity was not meant to be trapped. The original design of reality, call it the divine blueprint, the primordial pattern, the source, intended consciousness to move freely across states of existence. Life, death, reincarnation, ascension, all fluid, all open pathways. But something happened. Something catastrophic. The Gnostics call it the error. The Mesopotamians called it the cutting off. The Egyptians call it the veiling. The idea is the same. An ancient entity seized control of the material dimension and locked it into a finite state. That entity, according to these traditions, was Saturn. But why? Why construct a prison instead of a playground? Why trap consciousness instead of elevating it? The answer is brutal. Saturn feeds on limitation. It is not evil in the cartoon sense. It is a force, a principle, a mechanism that thrives when souls are compressed, restricted, slowed. Time itself is the compression of infinite potential into a linear sequence. Linear. That word hides the cage. In a linear reality, you can only be one thing at a time. You can only make one choice at a time. You can only live one lifespan at a time. You can only remember one path at a time. Infinite possibilities collapse into a single line. Saturn governs that collapse. And in doing so, Saturn harvests the energy produced by striving, suffering, longing, aging, repeating, failing, learning, forgetting, and trying again. That is the fuel of the time trap. Every regret you hold, every dream you chase, every heartbreak you replay, serves the mechanism. A mechanism you never agreed to. Now here's the part that should provoke real discussion. Did humanity once escape the trap? Did ancient civilizations, Atlantis, the Vedic solar dynasties, early Egyptian priest kings, possess knowledge that weakened Saturn's hold? Many esoteric texts hint at this. The Book of Enoch describes watchers descending to teach forbidden knowledge. The Vedas describe ascended beings capable of stepping outside time. The Hermetic texts speak of the sphere of the fixed stars, beyond which fate cannot reach. It sounds like these civilizations may have found cracks in the prison wall. And that's why their knowledge was destroyed. Not lost. Destroyed. Burned. Suppressed. Buried. Because anything that reveals the structure of the time cage threatens the one who built it. And let's be honest, if you ran a cosmic prison, would you hand out the blueprint to your inmates? Exactly. So ask yourself, why do we age? Why do we forget our past lives? Why can't we access the full spectrum of consciousness? Why does history repeat itself with mechanical precision? Why does time speed up as we grow older? Why do prophecies follow cycles like clockwork? Do these sound like natural processes or programmed constraints? If you're still here, drop a comment. Do you think time is natural or engineered? I want to see how many of you feel the hum beneath reality. And while you're at it, hit like if this investigation is opening your perception, because we're heading into darker territory next. And your support helps push this truth to more people who need to hear it. We've exposed the existence of the prison, Now it's time to expose its guards. To understand the guards of the Saturn Time Trap, you must first understand that no prison, cosmic or earthly, functions without layers of enforcement, checkpoints, and invisible surveillance. The ancient world describes these enforcers with disturbing consistency, beings that govern fate, memory, and the threshold between lives. The Greeks called them the Moirai, the Fates. The Egyptians called them the Shemsu Hor. The Persians called them the Fravashi. The Gnostics, the group most explicit about our cosmic captivity, called them the Archons. These were not angels, nor demons, nor metaphors. They were administrators, gatekeepers, overseers of the loops of time. But there is one Archon, above all others, who enforces the cycles of reincarnation. The Lord of the Black Wheel, a Saturnian entity described in esoteric texts as the one who weighs souls against their forgotten memories. Think about that for a moment. Forgotten. If memory were intact, reincarnation would lose its power. If you remembered every life you lived, you would stop repeating your mistakes. Stop feeding the system with emotional charge. You would bypass karma. You would see the patterns clearly. You would walk straight out of the maze. And that precisely is why memory is stripped at the threshold. Whisper. Not by nature, but by enforcement. The Archons, according to the Nag Hammadi scriptures, feed on emotional turbulence, fear, longing, guilt, regret, confusion, because these emotions generate what the Gnostics called psychic matter, a substance harvested within the time system. The more chaos in a human life, the more energy is produced. The more loops you're trapped in, the easier you are to predict, manipulate, and recycle. Now ask yourself, and seriously ask, slow down suddenly. Have you ever wondered why trauma repeats across generations? Why families live out the same tragedies? Why nations relive the same wars? Why civilizations rise and fall in almost perfect cycles? This is not coincidence. It is not human nature. It is design. A cosmic software program running predictable simulations. And the guards, these archonic forces, ensure the simulations keep looping. Ancient texts say they stand at the gates of incarnation and death, asking questions, enforcing amnesia, redirecting souls back into the timeline. Stories from Tibetan Buddhism describe similar figures, the lords of karma, who appear at death to show the soul visions that manipulate it into reincarnating. Hindu texts describe Yama, the judge of souls, who holds the records of your lives and determines your next incarnation based on karmic weight. But here's the part most traditions do not clarify. Who set up this entire karmic bureaucracy? Voice drops lower. Saturn, the cosmic warden, the architect, the one who in myth devours children so they cannot surpass him. In metaphysical terms, this means Saturn devours potential. He prevents evolution. He locks consciousness into loops of experience, not because he hates humanity. No, hatred would be too emotional. Saturn is cold, mechanical. He obeys structure, limits, boundaries. And anything beyond that is a threat to the system he governs. Now, if you're listening this far, I want you to drop a comment. Do you think the afterlife is a recycling system or a liberation? Your answer will spark a heavy debate in the comments, and that discussion is crucial because only when people begin questioning the narrative does the spell weaken. And before we go deeper, hit the like button if you haven't. Your support pushes this investigation past the algorithms that would rather keep your mind asleep. Pause. Because next, we reveal something the ancient priesthoods never wanted the public to know: how the trap was originally built, and how it might one day be dismantled. The construction of the Saturn Time Trap is one of the greatest suppressed stories in human history, and it appears in fragmented clues scattered across the world like shards of a broken mirror. To reconstruct it, we must gather the myths, the esoteric diagrams, and the forbidden cosmologies that survived censorship. According to the most ancient accounts, time was not always linear. It flowed like a river, not a railroad track. Souls could swim freely in any direction, forward, backward, sideways through realities, even outside existence altogether. That freedom terrified the entity now known as Saturn. The myths say that Saturn was once a ruler during the Golden Age, but when humanity evolved beyond his control, he imposed limits, strict, mathematical, unbreakable limits to prevent consciousness from growing. He introduced measurement. He introduced cycles. He introduced aging. He introduced death. And most importantly, he introduced linearity. Linearity is the key. The moment reality became linear, it became predictable. If it became predictable, it became controllable. And if it could be controllable, it could be turned into a farm. This is why every ancient calendar is obsessed with Saturn, its movements, its conjunctions, its symbolic geometry. The Sumerians associated Saturn with Ninurta, the enforcer of order. The Greeks identified Saturn as Kronos, father of the Olympians and lord of fate. The Romans feared Saturn as a god of confinement and cycles. The Hebrews associated Saturn with El, the stern patriarchal deity of law and boundaries. The Hindus equated Saturn with Shani, slow, heavy, relentless, the bringer of karma. The patterns are too identical to ignore. Now add one crucial detail. Saturn used to be worshipped as the son of night, a stationary, luminous object in the ancient sky. Mythologies reference it as the polar star. The Egyptians depicted it as the Jed pillar. The Gnostics described it as the throne above the archonic realms. If Saturn was once perceived as a central, immovable star, then a massive cosmic event must have displaced it, repositioning the solar system and triggering the collapse of the Golden Age. That displacement may be the moment the time trap was built. Some esoteric traditions claim Saturn's fall from its throne created a distortion, a ripple in the field of consciousness that forced time to collapse into a linear structure. Others say Saturn intentionally crafted the linear timeline as retaliation after losing his cosmic throne. And some, especially Gnostic sects, whisper that Saturn was never dethroned at all. He pretended to fall to justify constructing the prison. A convenient cosmic disaster to mask a calculated design. Regardless of the version, the outcome is the same. The rings of Saturn formed, the Archons took their posts, and the cycles of time, the yugas, the great year, the zodiacal ages began. Humanity entered the loop. Consciousness forgot its wings. Souls lost memory of their multi-dimensional nature. And time, once fluid, expansive, infinite, became a chronological conveyor belt. Now, I want you to engage below. Do you believe there was a golden age before linear time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This topic ignites incredible debates. And hit like if you're still here, because we're about to uncover something most researchers avoid. How the ritual systems of ancient civilizations helped maintain the time trap, and how those systems survive today in ways we still obey unknowingly. To grasp how the Saturn Time Trap sustains itself, you must examine the rituals that ancient civilizations performed. Rituals designed not for devotion, but for maintenance. Yes, maintenance. You see, prisons require upkeep. Systems require reinforcement, and the ancient cults of Saturn understood this intimately. From Carthage to Babylon, from the Hittites to Rome, Saturnian worship always involved offerings of time, cycles, or life force. Not because Saturn demanded worship, entities of his order don't care about praise, but because ritual action stabilizes the architecture of the trap. The primary ritual tool used across cultures was sacrifice. Not always literal blood sacrifice, though many civilizations took it that far, but symbolic sacrifice of time and potential. Think about it. Fasting, waiting periods, mandated observances, repetitive prayers, pilgrimages, ritual calendars, all forms of structured time. These practices trained humanity to accept linearity as divine law. And the more humans obeyed these cycles, the stronger the cycles became. Now consider the black cube, the supreme symbol of Saturn. In ancient rites, participants would walk around the cube in circular motion, reinforcing the looping pattern. Today, we see identical symbolism preserved in modern society. The Kaaba circumambulation. Businessmen in cube-shaped skyscrapers conducting meetings in rectangular rooms under fluorescent Saturnian lighting. Judges and academics wearing black robes, symbols of Saturnian authority. Even your calendar, with its rigid boxes, squares your life into segmented cages. Boxes. Every month. Every year. Another cage within a cage. Time divided into neat compartments. Rituals of Saturn have survived not because people understand them, but because they've been absorbed into cultural habits so deeply that we no longer question them. Midnight New Year's countdowns? Saturnian. The Monday to Friday grind cycle? Saturnian. The 9 to 5 schedule? Saturnian. 9 and 5 are historically sacred numbers to Saturn. Corporate logos shaped like cubes or rings? Saturnian. Even wedding rings, symbols of lifelong binding, can be traced to Saturn's planetary symbolism. Everywhere you look, the rituals continue, and you participate in them unknowingly. Energy goes where attention flows, and if billions of people unconsciously participate in time rituals every single day, the time trap strengthens. But here's where things become unsettling. Ancient mystery schools taught that only by breaking alignment with ritual time, by stepping outside the cycle, could a soul weaken Saturn's grip. Practices like spontaneous spiritual insight, trance states, non-linear meditation, ecstatic experiences, lucid dreaming, and astral projection were methods to escape the wheel. These practices survive today in altered forms, but modern society ridicules or suppresses them because they threaten the architecture of the prison, and the system protects itself. Now pause. Think deeply. How many choices in your life are truly your own, and how many are dictated by clocks, calendars, deadlines, routines? If time is the cage, then daily structure becomes the bars. And the more predictable your schedule, the more efficiently the system can harvest your emotional output. We haven't even reached the darkest part of this investigation yet. But before we continue, drop a comment. Do you think modern life is built to sustain the time trap? And if this content is resonating with you, tap like. Support this work so we can push deeper into the blueprint of the prison and uncover the forbidden question that ancient civilizations feared most. Can the Saturn Time Trap ever be broken?
The question of whether the Saturn Time Trap can be broken is not just philosophical, it is the forbidden obsession of countless ancient traditions, secret schools, vanished civilizations, and occult orders that risked annihilation for even asking it. And here's the secret most historians will never admit. Many believed the prison could be broken, but only from the inside. Meaning, humanity itself must awaken to the structure of the trap before any escape is possible. But awakening is dangerous, because to awaken, one must see the trap while still inside it. Imagine a fish suddenly realizing water is not the universe. Imagine a bird realizing the sky is not freedom. Imagine a human realizing time is not a natural law, but an imposed system. That realization alone destabilizes the architecture. And this is precisely why ancient priesthoods suppressed forbidden knowledge. Let's dig deeper. The Gnostic tradition teaches that enlightenment, true gnosis, is not about becoming moral or holy or obedient. It is about recognizing the artificiality of the matrix of time. The moment a soul perceives the timeline as a construct, the Archons lose their grip. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that when a person dies, the key to escaping reincarnation is recognizing the illusions shown by the lords of karma as projections, not punishments. Hindu yogis taught that stepping outside linear time could be achieved through samadhi, transcendent states where the mind ceases to track time, collapsing the prison walls temporarily. Egyptian initiates believed that in the Duat, the realm of the dead, if a soul remembered its divinity instead of bowing before the judges, it could bypass reincarnation altogether. These ideas appear everywhere, dripping through mythologies like coded hints. But the elites, kings, priests, and ruling classes wanted humanity predictable. They needed cycles, they needed repetition, they needed a world where the masses lived and died in loops while the gatekeepers maintained control. And this pattern has not changed. If you look carefully, you'll notice how modern society suppresses any state of consciousness that disrupts linear time. Hallucinogens criminalized, meditation mocked, deep introspection discouraged, solitude portrayed as unhealthy, sleep deprivation normalized, constant notifications ensuring your attention cannot drift into timeless awareness. They don't want you slipping through the cracks, because the moment you detach from the narrative of linear time, you threaten the system's stability. Now think about something else. Why do children experience time so slowly? Why do they feel days are endless, summers eternal, imagination boundless? And why does time accelerate as we age? Scientists blame neurology, but esoteric traditions suggest something else. Children are less aligned with Saturn's frequency. As we age, we attune to it. The trap strengthens around us. Whispers. Unless we resist. And resistance begins with awareness. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever experienced moments where time felt unreal, too slow, too fast, or completely absent? Your experiences matter. They reveal cracks in the mechanism. And if you haven't already, support this video with a like, because what comes next reveals how certain groups sought to escape the prison and how their attempts changed history forever.
Throughout history, there have been rebellions against the Saturn Time Trap. Quiet, hidden, buried rebellions that never made it into mainstream textbooks because they weren't political. They were metaphysical. These rebellions came not from armies, but from initiated minds, people who discovered the prison and refused to cooperate with its machinery. The first known rebellion was the Promethean Revolt, mythically represented as Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. Fire, in esoteric language, is not literal flame. It is the spark of consciousness, the awakening of awareness. Prometheus did not steal fire. He stole knowledge. He showed humans how to think outside divine authority. And what was his punishment? Eternal imprisonment, bound in chains, tormented in cycles, almost as if the myths are warning anyone who tries to break the trap. Another rebellion occurred in Egypt, where the priests of thought preserved secret teachings on how to navigate the duat without reincarnating. These teachings were restricted only to the initiated, pharaohs, scribes, and adepts, because unrestricted liberation of the masses would destabilize the political order. But the Hermetic texts survived, encoded with instructions for slipping out of linear time. The Essenes, a radical Jewish sect, attempted a similar revolt by teaching that the God of the Old Testament was not the true creator, but an archonic entity, Saturn in disguise. They believed liberation required bypassing the influence of the false god. They were wiped out. Gnostic Christians later picked up this rebellion, claiming salvation lay not in worship, but in dismantling the illusions of time, fate, and karma. Rome eradicated them violently, burning their texts, but fragments survived in the Nag Hammadi library. Even early Hindu and Buddhist sects declared that moksha, liberation, was escape from the wheel of time ruled by Shani, Saturn. But as these movements grew, mainstream priesthoods diluted them, replacing liberation with obedience. Over and over across cultures, the pattern repeats. Anyone who discovers the time trap tries to teach others, and every time, the priestly or political authorities crush them. Why? Because a population aware of the trap becomes ungovernable. A society that understands time as a construct becomes unpredictable. People stop fearing age, stop fearing death, stop participating in cycles, stop feeding the mechanism. Imagine a world where billions of people were no longer synchronized to clocks, deadlines, 9-to-5 routines, or aging anxiety. The entire global order, economic, political, spiritual, would collapse instantly, and the archonic infrastructure would lose its power source. This is why knowledge had to be obscured, wrapped in allegory, coded in myth, hidden in temples, encrypted in symbols only initiates could read. And yet, the code survived. The Renaissance was sparked when hidden Hermetic texts re-emerged in Europe. The Theosophical movement, flawed as it was, spread ancient escape teachings to millions. Jung uncovered the archetypes that hint at the prison's architecture. Modern physics now suggests time is not fundamental but emergent, meaning it may be optional. And innovations like psychedelics, meditation, sensory deprivation, lucid dreaming, and astral practices are re-emerging around the world, giving individuals direct access to states outside the Saturn frequency. The rebellion is no longer ancient, it's now. And you, watching this video, are part of that awakening. If you're still here, comment, do you think humanity will ever break the cycle? Let the discussion grow, and tap like to support this work. Because next, we explore something rarely spoken about, even in occult circles, the catastrophic consequence of breaking the time trap, and the unimaginable possibility waiting beyond the prison wall.
Breaking the Saturn time trap is not as simple as waking up, meditating, or learning forbidden knowledge, because the prison isn't merely external. The prison is also internal. You carry part of Saturn's architecture inside you. Your habits, your conditioning, your trauma loops, your beliefs about aging, failure, destiny, and limitation. Your attachment to linear stories, beginning, middle, end. Your reliance on clocks, your addiction to routine. These internalized structures reinforce the external ones. Imagine trying to break out of a cage while still gripping the bars from inside. That is humanity's dilemma. Ancient teachers knew this. They taught that escape begins not with cosmic rebellion, but with personal deconstruction, dissolving routine, dissolving fear, dissolving ego, dissolving attachment to past and future, dissolving the illusion of time inside the mind. The Buddhists called it stepping out of the wheel. The Hermeticists called it rising above the sphere of Saturn. The Gnostics called it piercing the veil of the Archons. These are all metaphors for the same inner transformation, learning to think, feel, and experience reality independent of time. Independent. That word alone is enough to make the system tremble, because independence breaks predictability. When unpredictability rises, the archonic control grid loses coherence. But here's where things grow even more unsettling. If enough individuals escape the inner architecture of the trap, the external trap weakens. If millions begin experiencing time non-linearly through synchronicity, precognition, timeless meditation, astral projection, altered states, the collective consciousness begins disconnecting from Saturn's broadcast, and that causes ripples. The timeline destabilizes, cycles break, prophecies fail, fate falters, the Archons panic. This is why in modern times you see an explosion of distractions, constant entertainment, anxiety-triggering news cycles, never-ending tasks, social media loops. These aren't just cultural trends, they're reinforcements, they're distractions designed to keep your mind locked in linear thinking, preventing you from sensing the cracks in the system. After all, why would a prisoner question the walls if he's too busy watching the show projected on them? But here is the twist ancient traditions rarely discussed openly. Breaking the time trap is possible, but dangerous. Because the moment you detach from Saturn's frequency, you become visible to forces outside the prison, forces that have been watching, waiting, some benevolent, some indifferent, some predatory. Imagine a prisoner finally climbing over the wall, only to realize that beyond the prison yard is a wilderness of unknown beings. Liberation is not comfort. Liberation is exposure. And this is why most traditions emphasized preparation. Consciousness must be strengthened, fear dissolved, ego transcended, awareness expanded. Otherwise, encountering beings outside linear time, entities unbound by chronology, morality, or identity, can shatter an unprepared soul. But don't misunderstand, liberation is not a nightmare. It is simply vast. And for a consciousness raised in confinement, vastness can feel like terror. Now I want you to pause and ask yourself, if you had the chance to escape time, truly escape, would you take it? Or would you cling to familiarity, loops, predictability, and structure? This question isn't hypothetical. It's the heart of the Saturn dilemma. And your answer in the comments might reveal more about your psyche than you expect. If you're still with me,
Hit like because the next blocks will take us deeper, revealing what waits beyond the trap, who built the next layer of reality, and the truth about humanity's hidden relationship with the entity behind Saturn.
And now we arrive at the end of this journey. Or what seems like the end, because endings themselves are part of the Saturn illusion, mere punctuation marks on a timeline designed to convince you that stories must conclude. But this one concludes differently. We have followed the architecture of the time trap, from its ancient construction, through its rituals, its guardians, its rebellions, its cracks, and the dangerous possibility of liberation. But there is one final revelation you must hear before we close, not whispered by priests, not carved into stone, not encoded in myth, but carried quietly through millennia by the few who saw the mechanism clearly. The secret is this: the Saturn Time Trap isn't just the prison you are stuck in, it is the prison you help create. Not your fault, not by choice, but through unconscious participation, through the belief that time is absolute, through the fear of endings, through the obsession with repetition, routine, calendars, clocks, symbols disguised as necessities. You help maintain the cage because the cage was built to feel familiar, comfortable, predictable. Yet deep inside, you have always felt the truth. How your intuition occasionally slips through the cracks, how moments feel eternal or vanish instantly, how memories distort, how déjà vu repeats like a broken track. These are not quirks, they are hints, glitches, reminders. The prison has seams, and you were never meant to forget that. Now listen carefully. The greatest deception Saturn ever cast was making humanity believe we are small, powerless, and isolated within time. But you are not small. You are not powerless. You are not isolated. Consciousness is older than Saturn, older than the Archons, older than the entire structure of linear time. And the moment you begin to recognize time as a construct, something imposed rather than intrinsic, you weaken the trap's influence. Ancient initiates described this phase as seeing the gears of the world, the moment when a soul senses the machinery behind reality. Once you see the gears can no longer control you. But remember, awakening does not mean escaping instantly. A prisoner who discovers the door does not vanish through it. He prepares. He sharpens his mind, strengthens his spirit, studies the guards, learns the rhythm of the patrol, and waits for the moment the system blinks. You, right now, listening to this, are doing the same. You're not escaping yet. You're remembering. And that is the first revolution. Because once a mind remembers its true nature, the system shivers. The Archons notice, the loops destabilize, the cycles begin to skip, fate loses its grip. This is why synchronicities increase when you awaken. They are not coincidences, they are fractures. The script of your life begins to glitch, revealing possibilities that shouldn't exist in a linear universe. And the more this happens, the more you realize that time is not a cage around consciousness. Consciousness is a storm around time. The storm is stronger, always has been, but only when it wakes. And you are waking. Humanity is waking, slowly, shakily, unevenly, but undeniably. That awakening terrifies the system that depends on predictability, which is why now, more than ever, the world is flooded with noise, distraction, conflict, fear, division, anything to keep you tethered to the timeline, obedient to the clock, blind to the cracks. But cracks are appearing faster than they can be patched. People feel it. Maybe you feel it too. That strange sense that reality is thinning, that time is bending, that the world is not functioning the way it used to. These sensations are not illusions. They are symptoms, signs that the prison walls are weakening. And when the prison weakens, something extraordinary becomes possible. The inner and outer traps begin to synchronize and collapse. But collapse is not destruction. Collapse is transformation. Imagine a timeline folding in on itself like paper, revealing layers you were never supposed to see. Imagine remembering lives you never lived, choices you never made, futures you haven't reached. Imagine experiencing time not as a line, but as a field, open, multidimensional, fluid. That is what waits beyond Saturn's gate. Not chaos, not madness, but expansion, possibility, reality without a ruler, consciousness without a cage, a universe not filtered through cycles, but experienced as raw, unbounded presence. The true architects of that universe are not gods. They are you, all of you, because consciousness isn't trapped inside time. Time is trapped in consciousness. Saturn can bend the river, but he cannot contain the ocean. So now, as we close this exploration, you must ask yourself one last question, and I want you to answer it boldly in the comments. Do you want to remain inside the comfort of time, or dare to remember who you were before the prison? Your answer is not just engagement, it is a declaration, a signal, a choice. And if this journey has opened something in you, even slightly, tap the like button to help others find this truth. Support the channel so we can continue unmasking the machinery behind existence. Share your thoughts so others can see the cracks through your eyes. Because the time trap isn't forever. Not for humanity, not for consciousness, not for you. The rings will break, the cycle will fracture, the gate will open. And when it does, I hope you remember this moment. The moment you felt the first tremor of freedom. The moment the prison walls shivered. The moment Saturn blinked. Thank you for listening, truly. Until our next descent into the forbidden, stay aware, stay curious, and stay outside the clock.